The emergence of Uruk as the earliest true city in human history marked a decisive turning point in the evolution of civilization. What had once been small, scattered villages began to transform into something new and far more complex. An urban society that would lay the foundations for later Mesopotamian culture and influence distant regions. Uruk's rise was not accidental but rather the result of unique geographic advantages, technological innovation, and social organization that together reshaped how human beings lived, worked, and related to one another. Located in the southern reaches of Mesopotamia, about 250 kilometers southeast of today's Baghdad, Uruk occupied a landscape that proved exceptionally suited for growth. This was where the branches of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers wove together into a network of waterways and seasonal flood channels. In an otherwise harsh and arid environment, these channels transformed the region into a fertile expanse rich in agricultural potential. Over thousands of years, the annual floods had deposited deep layers of dark alluvial soil. These silts and organic deposits created fields capable of sustaining repeated cycles of cultivation. Unlike many early farming societies, Uruk's inhabitants did not face quick soil exhaustion, because each year the floods restored nutrients and renewed fertility. The flat terrain of the alluvial plain provided an ideal canvas for irrigation networks, and the abundance of clay in the area offered unlimited raw material for both humble homes and monumental constructions. Uruk's position on natural trade routes linking the Iranian plateau with Arabia further increased its significance. This placed the settlement at a crossroads where goods from distant lands could be exchanged. River routes connected Uruk southward to the Persian Gulf, opening pathways to maritime trade, while overland caravans carried timber, metals, and stones from the Zagros Mountains. From the very beginning, Uruk was a place of interaction and exchange, where goods, ideas, and cultural practices converged. The archaeological record, pieced together since the late 19th century, reveals the gradual but steady transformation from small-scale villages into an organized city. The earliest levels beneath Uruk, dating around 4000 BC, display evidence of subsistence farming and animal husbandry. Mud brick houses clustered around open courtyards show simple, family-based living. Storage facilities for grain indicate that these communities already managed surpluses, though on a limited scale. In these earliest phases, life still revolved around subsistence, kinship ties, and local production. By around 3800 BC, however, Uruk was undergoing visible change. Excavators have uncovered streets arranged in deliberate patterns, houses built according to standardized measurements, and pottery that was no longer handmade but crafted on the potter's wheel. This technological leap allowed for greater uniformity and speed of production, pointing toward the rise of specialized artisans. Cylinder seals from this same era demonstrate the emergence of record-keeping and administrative oversight, evidence that property, trade, and ownership required new systems of management. Nothing symbolized Uruk's transformation more than the appearance of monumental architecture. Around 3500 BC, the construction of the Great Anu Ziggurat began. This enormous stepped structure, rising nearly 40 meters above the surrounding plain, stood as both a religious and political symbol. The project required immense planning and organization. Its orientation toward the cardinal points suggested astronomical knowledge, while its internal arrangements displayed advanced engineering. To build it, laborers quarried stone from faraway places, hauled heavy timber from distant forests, and molded millions of uniform bricks. The coordination of such tasks was only possible through complex administrative systems. Evidence of this organization survives in clay tablets bearing numerical signs and early pictographs discovered within nearby temple precincts. The temple quarter around the ziggurat became a nucleus for both sacred and secular life. Here, archaeologists have found evidence not only of ritual spaces but also of administrative offices, workshops, and storerooms. Decorative brickwork and finely crafted facades distinguished these buildings from the simpler homes of ordinary citizens. Across the city, specialized districts took shape. Craftsmen established entire quarters devoted to pottery, weaving, metalwork, and stone carving. The use of molds and mass production techniques suggests a new efficiency in manufacture, likely overseen by temple or palace authorities. Equally crucial to Uruk's growth was the mastery of irrigation. Surveys of the surrounding countryside reveal an impressive network of canals, levees, and smaller ditches extending for many kilometers. The main canal, over 15 meters wide and stretching more than 30 kilometers, carried Euphrates water into the agricultural hinterland. From this artery, smaller channels branched outward, reaching fields of barley, wheat, vegetables, and groves of date palms. Farmers controlled water through weirs and sluice gates, adjusting supply to seasonal needs. Such engineering enabled a scale of agricultural surplus that supported thousands of non-farming inhabitants within the city walls. As Uruk prospered, social differences became increasingly visible. Burial practices reveal sharp contrasts. While commoners were interred in simple pits with few possessions, elites rested in tombs filled with imported metals, carved stone vessels, and fine jewelry. Residential architecture mirrored these divisions. Large compounds in the temple district featured dozens of rooms, multiple courtyards, and elaborate decoration, housing priests, officials, and wealthy merchants. These residences often contained private workshops and storerooms, reflecting their owners' control of resources and labor. Meanwhile, archives of clay tablets written in early cuneiform script document the emergence of bureaucracy. These records, contracts, tax accounts, land grants, and trade agreements demonstrate a sophisticated system of governance. Titles mentioned in the texts point to a layered hierarchy of officials, each with specific roles. Some managed estates, others supervised workshops or organized labor for irrigation and building projects. This concentration of authority marked a clear break from the more egalitarian village structures that had preceded it. Craft specialization also expanded dramatically. Large kilns capable of firing hundreds of vessels reveal pottery production on an industrial scale. Textiles were processed in bulk, and evidence of standardized design points to centralized oversight. Goods produced in these workshops were not only for local use but also for redistribution and trade. Archaeologists believe temple and palace administrators directed much of this activity, ensuring consistent supply and quality. The rapid growth of Uruk brought new challenges. Managing sanitation for thousands of people required organized waste disposal, as shown by refuse dumps and drainage channels unearthed by archaeologists. The environment, too, bore the impact of urban life. Timber extraction for construction and fuel led to widespread deforestation, while clay pits dug for bricks altered local drainage systems. Irrigation transformed wetlands into farmland, changing ecosystems that had endured for centuries. By the mid-4th millennium BC, Uruk's influence was spreading far beyond its walls. Through trade, colonization, and cultural diffusion, Uruk's administrative systems, artistic styles, and technologies reached into Syria, Anatolia, and Iran. Archaeological evidence from these regions shows entire settlements laid out according to Mesopotamian models. Artifacts, seals, and architectural features found hundreds of kilometers away match those of Uruk, suggesting not just trade but deliberate colonization. At Habuba Kabira in modern Syria, for example, archaeologists uncovered a planned city that mirrored Uruk's own layout, complete with administrative buildings and standardized pottery. The strategic positioning of such colonies was no coincidence. Habuba Kabira, located at a key crossing on the Euphrates, controlled vital trade routes while also granting access to nearby timber and metal resources. Farther north in Anatolia, at Arslantepe, a vast administrative complex revealed cuneiform tablets and Uruk-style architecture. This suggests Uruk's interest in securing copper supplies, which were essential for tools and weapons. Even eastward, in the Iranian plateau, Uruk's influence was felt strongly. At Susa, local elites adopted Uruk's administrative practices, architecture, and writing systems while maintaining their distinct identity. Tablets from Susa record shipments of metals, stones, and other resources traded for Mesopotamian goods such as textiles and grain. Smaller trading outposts, like those discovered in the Zagros Mountains, demonstrate the remarkable reach of Uruk's networks. Even in remote locations, archaeologists have found Uruk-style pottery, seals, and tablets, evidence that merchants and administrators extended their influence across vast distances. This outward expansion was accompanied by groundbreaking intellectual achievements. The development of writing at Uruk was one of humanity's most significant milestones. The earliest proto-cuneiform tablets, dating around 3400 BC, recorded numbers, pictographs, and simple accounts. These documents tracked livestock, land, and goods, reflecting the needs of administrators. Within a few centuries, writing evolved rapidly, with signs becoming standardized and phonetic values introduced. By around 3200 BC, fully developed cuneiform script existed, enabling complex records and legal contracts. Clay tablets from Uruk preserve agreements for land sales, marriage, and commercial partnerships, showing that writing had already become essential for managing society's complexities. The invention and spread of writing during the Uruk period revolutionized administration and long-distance communication. No longer dependent solely on oral memory or fragile tokens, officials could now create permanent, portable records. This development transformed economic management, diplomacy, and law. Proto-cuneiform began with numerical notations and pictographs, but within a short span of time scribes created a system that represented syllables and abstract concepts. The wedge-shaped impressions left by reed styluses in clay tablets became the distinctive hallmark of Mesopotamian civilization. These early texts reveal far more than lists of goods. They include agreements between parties, contracts detailing marriage arrangements or land transfers, and accounts of debts owed and repaid. Legal procedures, such as rules for property ownership and dispute resolution, were already in place. The existence of such documents shows that Uruk society had developed a sophisticated legal framework to regulate complex relationships among its growing population and far-flung colonies. As writing spread beyond Uruk, it created a shared system of record-keeping that connected different communities into a unified commercial and cultural sphere. Even sites outside Mesopotamia began adopting cuneiform for their own purposes, translating local languages into a Mesopotamian administrative style. Technological advances accompanied this cultural flowering. The potter's wheel, invented around 3500 BC, allowed craftsmen to produce vessels with unprecedented speed and uniformity. Archaeological evidence shows that wheel-made pottery gradually replaced hand-built ceramics across the Uruk cultural world. The change required potters to master new techniques of centering clay and controlling wall thickness, but it also revolutionized workshop organization. Production became faster, more reliable, and more standardized, qualities essential for large-scale distribution. The spread of this technology along trade routes suggests deliberate efforts to transfer knowledge from one settlement to another, reinforcing the interconnectedness of the Uruk sphere. Another transformative innovation was the sailboat. Early depictions on seals and pottery show rivercraft equipped with rectangular sails. These vessels could harness wind power, making it possible to travel upstream against currents and to cover long distances with heavy cargoes at reduced cost. With sail technology, Mesopotamian merchants could move bulky commodities such as grain, stone, or timber far more efficiently. Archaeological finds from ancient harbors and dock facilities further attest to the sophistication of Uruk's transportation systems. The ability to transport goods reliably over long distances gave Uruk a decisive advantage in trade and resource management. Weights and measures were also standardized, creating a common economic language across regions. Excavations have uncovered stone weights carved according to consistent units, often tied to quantities of grain. This system allowed merchants from different backgrounds to trade on fair and mutually intelligible terms. The diffusion of Uruk standards throughout the Middle East laid the groundwork for centuries of international commerce. For the first time in history, communities separated by hundreds of kilometers could engage in transactions with shared expectations of value and exchange. Metallurgy advanced as well. Copper became the dominant material for tools and weapons, and archaeologists have found evidence of alloying techniques and standardized casting. The production of copper artifacts in consistent shapes and sizes suggests centralized control, perhaps directed by temples or elites. Access to copper deposits, especially in Anatolia and Iran, was a major incentive for Uruk expansion. Control of these resources gave Uruk both economic strength and military capability. Even though evidence for large-scale warfare during this period remains limited, the strategic placement of fortified settlements hints that defense and control were important concerns. The expansion of Uruk was not merely economic. It was also institutional. Temples became central hubs of administration, ritual, and production. The great temple complex of Inanna at Uruk illustrates this vividly. Covering several hectares, it contains ceremonial halls, storage facilities, workshops, and residences for priests and staff. Archaeological excavations show that temples managed agricultural estates, coordinated craft production, and maintained records of tribute and trade. Cuneiform tablets from these sites record a range of administrative roles: high-ranking priests who set policy, managers overseeing estates or workshops, and scribes keeping meticulous accounts. Temples thus functioned as both sacred spaces and bureaucratic centers, blending religion with government. Uruk-style temples appeared at colonial settlements as well. Each adapted to local conditions while retaining the essential organizational principles developed in the Mesopotamian heartland. In this way, religion served as a vehicle for integrating diverse communities into a single cultural system. Temple personnel managed trade, oversaw crafts, and maintained the communication networks that linked colonies to Uruk. These institutions provided stability and continuity, ensuring that Uruk's influence endured even far from Mesopotamia. The economic integration of the Uruk sphere created opportunities for specialization. Communities focused on goods that they were best suited to produce. Highland settlements mined and processed metals, while fertile lowland regions concentrated on crops and textiles. This division of labor fostered interdependence and generated wealth. Archaeology reveals improvements in living standards where trade networks thrived: larger houses, finer goods, and investments in public works such as walls, canals, and ceremonial spaces. Elite households in particular grew more elaborate, reflecting the accumulation of wealth and status by those who controlled trade and administration. At the same time, inequality deepened. The burials of high-status individuals grew increasingly extravagant, filled with luxury items and symbols of power. Ordinary people, by contrast, were buried with little more than simple pottery. This gap illustrates the consolidation of authority in the hands of a few, a trend that would define Mesopotamian political culture for millennia. Kingship began to emerge out of earlier collective governance by temple institutions. By the early dynastic period around 3100 to 2900 BC, rulers with divine or semi-divine status began to dominate the political landscape. Archaeological finds from royal cemeteries, with their monumental tombs and rich offerings, mark this shift toward personalized kingship. The royal cemetery at Uruk, near the precinct of the Inanna Temple, provides some of the earliest evidence of this transition. Dating to around 2700 BC, these tombs contained not only precious grave goods but also signs of ritual sacrifice, with attendants buried alongside rulers. Such practices suggest that leaders were regarded as more than human, possessing divine authority that extended into the afterlife. This change in political culture fundamentally altered Mesopotamian society, setting the stage for the rise of city-states ruled by powerful kings. The legacy of Uruk's innovations extended far beyond its immediate era. The systems of writing, administration, trade, and urban planning it pioneered became the foundation for later Mesopotamian civilizations such as Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon. The city's influence radiated outward for centuries, shaping the development of law, governance, religion, and technology throughout the ancient Near East. Even as Uruk itself declined in relative power, the cultural and institutional patterns it had established continued to define the region. The story of Uruk is thus not simply about the growth of one city but about the transformation of human society as a whole. From modest villages clustered along riverbanks, people created the first great experiment in urban life. Through innovation, organization, and expansion, they laid down the cornerstones of civilization: writing, monumental architecture, bureaucracy, law, and trade networks that still resonate in human history today. The achievements of Uruk set humanity on a path toward ever more complex societies, ensuring that the echoes of this first city would resound through millennia of cultural development. These burial chambers, constructed of carefully fitted limestone blocks and sealed with Betuan mortar, contained grave goods of unprecedented richness and variety. Gold jewelry crafted with sophisticated granulation techniques, silver vessels decorated with raps, animal motifs, and weapons inlaid with precious stones, demonstrate the concentration of wealth and artistic skill available to Uruk's ruling elite. The most significant of these royal burials, designated Tomb PG 789 by excavators, contain the remains of a male individual accompanied by an extraordinary array of ceremonial objects. The burial included a golden helmet crafted in the likeness of a human head with carefully rendered facial features and an elaborate headdress incorporating lapis lazuli and carnelian inlays. Accompanying weapons featured gold hilted daggers with blades of exceptionally pure copper, spearheads decorated with intricate engravings, and a ceremonial mace topped with a carved stone lion's head. The technical sophistication required to produce these objects indicates the presence of specialized craftsmen working exclusively for royal patrons. Analysis of organic materials preserved in the tomb reveals additional aspects of early dynastic royal culture. Fragments of textiles woven with gold thread demonstrate advanced weaving techniques and the importation of precious materials from distant sources. Wooden objects inlaid with shell and stone show sophisticated joinery methods and decorative arts. The presence of musical instruments, including a silver lyre with bull's head sound, suggests that royal courts maintained professional musicians and that ceremonial occasions involved elaborate artistic performances. The historical figure of Gilgamesh emerges from this archaeological context as both a legendary character and a probable historical ruler whose reign coincided with Uruk's political and cultural zenith during the early dynastic period. Cuneiform tablets from Slightly later periods consistently refer to Gilgamesh as the fifth king of Uruk following the mythical flood, placing his reign sometime around 2700 to 2650 BC according to Mesopotamian chronological traditions. While no contemporary inscriptions definitively identify Gilgamesh as a historical figure, the consistency of later references and the archaeological evidence for powerful early dynastic rulers of Uruk strongly suggest a historical basis for the legendary king. The Sumerian king list compiled during the 3rd millennium BC, but drawing on much earlier traditions credits Gilgamesh with a reign of 126 years and describes him as the one who surpassed all kings. This obviously mythologized account nevertheless preserves what appear to be genuine historical memories of a ruler who achieved extraordinary military and political success. The text associates Gilgamesh with major construction projects at Uruk, including the rebuilding of the city's defensive walls and the expansion of temple complexes, activities that correspond to archaeological evidence for intensive building programs during the relevant period. Contemporary administrative tablets from Uruk contain references to individuals bearing names similar to those associated with Gilgamesh in later literary sources. A tablet dating to approximately 2650 BC mentions a high official named Gilgamesh's life in connection with major irrigation works, suggesting that the legendary king's name had already acquired significant cultural resonance within decades of his presumed death. Other tablets reference individuals with names incorporating elements from the Gilgamesh literary tradition, indicating that stories about this ruler circulated widely in oral form before their eventual transcription into epic literature. The archaeological record provides substantial evidence for the military capabilities that would have been necessary for a ruler of Gilgamesh's legendary stature. Excavations at Uruk have uncovered weapons caches dating to the early dynastic period that demonstrate sophisticated metallurgical techniques and standardized production methods. Bronze spearheads show consistent alloy compositions and manufacturing techniques that suggest centralized armament production under royal control. Arrowheads crafted from carefully knapped flint display remarkable uniformity in size and shape, indicating systematic military organization and training. Fortification systems constructed during this period reveal advanced understanding of defensive architecture and siege warfare. The famous walls of Uruk mentioned prominently in the Epic of Gilgamesh have been partially traced through archaeological survey and excavation. The defensive circuit stretched approximately 9 kilometers around the city and incorporated both the urban core and surrounding agricultural areas. Construction techniques included massive mud brick foundations reinforced with boom and mortar and faced with baked brick in critical sections. The walls featured projecting bastions at regular intervals and elaborate gate complexes with multiple defensive chambers. The composition of the Epic of Gilgamesh represents one of humanity's earliest and most sophisticated attempts to explore fundamental questions about mortality, friendship, and the meaning of human achievement through narrative literature. The earliest known versions of Gilgamesh stories appear on cuneiform tablets dating to approximately 2500 BC, written in Sumerian and consisting of individual episodes that were later integrated into longer narrative sequences. These early compositions demonstrate remarkable literary sophistication, employing complex poetic structures, symbolic imagery, and psychological characterization that established conventions for epic literature. Throughout the ancient world, the standard version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, compiled during the 2nd millennium BC, but drawing on much earlier Sumerian sources, preserves what appears to be authentic early dynastic historical and cultural material. The epic's detailed descriptions of Uruk's architecture, religious practices, and social customs correspond closely to archaeological evidence from the relevant period. References to specific locations within the city, including the Iana temple and various ceremonial spaces, demonstrate intimate familiarity with Uruk's urban layout during the early dynastic period. The character of Enkidu in the Gilgamesh epic provides valuable insight into early dynastic concepts of civilization and wilderness. Enkidu's transformation from wild man to civilized urban dweller reflects contemporary concerns about the relationship between settled agricultural communities and nomadic, pastoral groups that inhabited the regions surrounding Mesopotamian cities. Archaeological evidence shows increasing contact between urban centers and mobile populations during this period, including trade relationships, military conflicts, and cultural exchange that influenced the development of both urban and nomadic societies. The friendship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu, which forms the emotional core of the epic narrative, explores themes of loyalty, cooperation, and mutual dependence that reflect the social values of early dynastic urban communities. The epic's emphasis on the importance of personal relationships and shared adventures resonates with archaeological evidence for the emergence of warrior aristocracies during this period. Elite burial sites contain paired burials and shared grave goods that suggest close personal bonds between high-ranking individuals, possibly reflecting the kind of heroic friendships celebrated in epic literature. The quest for immortality that drives the epic's later episodes reflects genuine early dynastic concerns about death and the afterlife. Archaeological evidence from royal burials shows elaborate attempts to preserve the deceased and provide for their continued existence in death. Mummification techniques, though less sophisticated than later Egyptian practices, appear in some high-status burials from this period. Grave goods include food offerings, personal possessions, and ritual objects intended to sustain the deceased in the afterlife, demonstrating beliefs about post-mortem existence that parallel themes explored in the Gilgamesh epic. The political context of early dynastic Uruk involved complex relationships with other Sumerian city-states that frequently erupted into warfare over territorial boundaries, water rights, and commercial privileges. Ununiform tablets from this period document military campaigns launched by Uruk rulers against neighboring cities, including Uar, and Lagash. These conflicts typically involve disputes over agricultural land in border regions, control of irrigation canals, and access to trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with highland regions. The military organization required for these interstate conflicts demonstrates sophisticated logistical capabilities and tactical understanding. Administrative tablets record the mobilization of troops from various districts within Uruk's territory, the procurement of weapons and supplies, and the coordination of military campaigns lasting several months. Inscriptions describe the capture of enemy cities, the imposition of tribute payments, and the installation of puppet rulers loyal to Uruk. These activities required administrative systems capable of managing complex military operations and integrating conquered territories into Uruk's political structure. Archaeological evidence from battlefield sites provides additional information about early dynastic warfare methods and military technology. Excavations at Tel Arab, site of a major battle between Uruk and coalition forces from several rival cities, uncovered thousands of bronze arrowheads, spear points, and axe heads scattered across the ancient battlefield. Analysis of weapon damage patterns suggests that early dynastic armies employed coordinated tactical formations and specialized military roles. Heavy infantry equipped with bronze-tipped spears and leather armor engaged in close combat, while archers provided supporting fire from protected positions. The religious developments that accompanied Uruk's political expansion during the early dynastic period transformed the city into the primary cult center for several major Mesopotamian deities. The worship of Anu, the sky god and supreme deity of the Sumerian pantheon, reached new levels of institutional sophistication with the construction of massive temple complexes and the establishment of elaborate ritual cycles. The Anu ziggurat underwent major reconstruction during this period with the addition of multiple terraces, ceremonial staircases, and subsidiary shrines that created a monumental religious landscape visible from great distances. Archaeological excavations in the Anu temple complex have revealed evidence for daily religious activities that involved hundreds of priests, temple servants, and ritual specialists. Form tablets document the provision of food offerings on a massive scale, including thousands of loaves of bread, hundreds of jars of beer, and dozens of sacrificial animals presented to the deity each day. The economic requirements for maintaining these religious activities necessitated the dedication of vast agricultural estates and craft production facilities to temple operations. The cult of Inanna, goddess of love and warfare, achieved particular prominence during the early dynastic period through association with royal power and military success. The Inanna temple complex dedicated to Inanna became one of the largest religious institutions in the ancient world, covering over 20 hectares and containing dozens of individual buildings. Archaeological evidence shows that the temple controlled extensive commercial operations, including textile production, metalworking, and long-distance trade that generated enormous wealth for religious and political purposes. The integration of religious and political authority during this period created new forms of divine kingship that would influence Mesopotamian political culture for centuries. Royal inscriptions from Uruk described kings as chosen representatives of the gods responsible for maintaining cosmic order through proper religious observances and just governance. This ideological framework provided religious legitimation for royal authority while creating expectations about kingly behavior that influence political decision-making and administrative practices. Temple construction projects during the early dynastic period demonstrate remarkable advances in architectural engineering and artistic decoration. The reconstruction of major religious complexes required the coordination of thousands of workers over multiple construction seasons involving quarrying operations, transportation logistics, and specialized craft production on an unprecedented scale. Archaeological analysis of construction techniques reveals sophisticated understanding of structural engineering, including the use of buttresses, arch construction, and foundation systems designed to support massive superstructures. The artistic decoration of these temple complexes established new standards for monumental art and architectural sculpture. Excavations have uncovered elaborate relief carvings depicting religious ceremonies, mythological scenes, and royal activities executed with remarkable technical skill and artistic sophistication. These sculptural programs required teams of specialized artists working under centralized direction to create coherent decorative schemes that communicated complex religious and political messages to temple visitors. The economic foundation supporting these religious and political developments rested on continued agricultural intensification and craft specialization. Throughout Uruk's territorial sphere, archaeological surveys of the Surrounding countryside show evidence for expanded irrigation systems, increased settlement density, and specialized agricultural production that generated the surpluses necessary to support large non-productive populations. The development of new crop varieties and cultivation techniques increased agricultural productivity while reducing labor requirements, freeing workers for construction projects and military service. Craft production during this period achieved new levels of technical sophistication and artistic achievement. Workshops associated with temple and palace complexes produced luxury goods of extraordinary quality, including jewelry, weapons, textiles, and ceremonial objects that demonstrated the highest levels of technical skill. The standardization of production techniques and the development of specialized tools enabled craftsmen to achieve consistent quality while increasing production volumes to meet growing demand from elite patrons and export markets. The magnificent cultural achievements and political dominance that characterized Uruk during the early dynastic period faced an unprecedented challenge around 2334 BC when Sargon of Akkad launched his systematic conquest of the Sumerian city-states. This military campaign represented far more than a simple change of political leadership. It marked the beginning of humanity's first multi-ethnic empire and initiated a complex process of cultural synthesis that would fundamentally transform Mesopotamian civilization. Archaeological evidence from Uruk's destruction layers dating to this period reveals the violent nature of the Akkadian conquest with burned buildings, scattered weapons, and hastily buried treasure hoards indicating fierce resistance by the city's defenders. Sargon's military success against Uruk and other Sumerian cities resulted from innovative tactical approaches and superior organizational capabilities that overcame traditional city-state defensive strategies. Akkadian military forces employed composite bows with greater range and penetrating power than traditional Sumerian weapons, enabling archers to engage enemy formations from safer distances. The Akkadians also utilized bronze-tipped arrows with improved metallurgy that could penetrate leather and bronze armor more effectively than earlier projectiles. Archaeological excavations at battle sites from this period show concentrations of distinctively Akkadian arrowheads alongside damaged Sumerian defensive equipment, providing physical evidence for the technological advantages that contributed to Akkadian victory. The siege of Uruk itself appears to have involved sophisticated engineering techniques that overcame the city's formidable defensive walls. Akkadian forces constructed earthwork ramps against sections of the fortification system, allowing assault troops to reach the top of defensive structures. Archaeological investigation of the wall foundations shows evidence for systematic undermining operations where attackers dug tunnels beneath wall sections and then collapsed them by burning wooden support timbers. The discovery of bronze mining tools and charcoal deposits in these tunnel systems confirms the deliberate nature of these siege works. The integration of Uruk into Sargon's expanding empire required administrative innovations that could accommodate the cultural and linguistic diversity of conquered territories while maintaining centralized control from the Akkadian capital. Sargon's solution involved a dual administrative system that preserved local Sumerian institutions and religious practices while superimposing Akkadian military governors and tax collectors. This approach allowed conquered cities to maintain their traditional identities while ensuring loyalty to imperial authority through a combination of incentives and coercion. Uniform tablets from the early Akkadian period at Uruk document the systematic transformation of local government structures. Akkadian officials assumed control of major administrative functions including tax collection, military recruitment and judicial proceedings, while Sumerian priests and traditional civic leaders retained authority over religious ceremonies and local community affairs. This division of responsibilities created a complex but functional system that balanced imperial control with local autonomy, preventing the widespread rebellions that might have resulted from more heavy-handed administrative approaches. The linguistic changes that accompanied Adian rule produced one of the most significant cultural transformations in ancient Mesopotamian history. Adian Semitic language, fundamentally different from Sumerian in grammar and vocabulary, gradually became the dominant language for official administration and commercial transactions throughout the empire. However, rather than completely displacing Sumerian, the two languages developed a complex relationship where Sumerian remained the preferred medium for religious and scholarly texts, while Adian dominated secular administration and international diplomacy. Archaeological evidence for this linguistic transition appears in the changing character of cuneiform. Archives at Uruk. Early Akkadian period tablets show a mixture of Sumerian and Akkadian texts, often dealing with the same administrative matters, but written in different languages for different audiences. Sumerian continued to be used for communications with temple personnel and traditional community leaders, while Adian served for correspondence with imperial officials and foreign merchants. This bilingual administrative system required scribal schools to train administrators capable of reading and writing both languages fluently. The religious transformations that occurred under Adian rule demonstrate the complex process of cultural synthesis that characterized this period. Rather than imposing their own deities and religious practices, Adian rulers adopted a syncretic approach that incorporated Sumerian gods into their own pantheon while introducing new religious concepts and ceremonial practices. The result was an enriched religious tradition that combined elements from both cultures in ways that enhanced rather than diminished the spiritual significance of established practices. Archaeological excavations at the Yana Temple complex show evidence for major reconstruction projects undertaken during the early Akkadian period. Building campaigns incorporated traditional Sumerian architectural forms with new decorative elements reflecting Adian artistic traditions. Relief sculptures from this period depict religious ceremonies that combine Sumerian ritual actions with Adian ceremonial dress and symbolic objects. The iconography shows Adian rulers participating in traditional Sumerian religious festivals, demonstrating their acceptance of local spiritual traditions, while asserting their political authority. The economic integration of Uruk into the Akkadian Empire created new opportunities for commercial expansion while transforming traditional trade relationships. Adian control over multiple city-states enabled the creation of standardized weights, measures, and currency systems that facilitated commerce across vast distances. Merchants from Uruk gained access to markets throughout the empire from the Mediterranean coast to the Iranian plateau, while foreign traders brought exotic goods and new technologies to Mesopotamian cities. Administrative tablets from this period document the expansion of Uruk's commercial networks under imperial protection. Adian military forces provided security for merchant caravans traveling between distant cities, reducing the risks associated with long-distance trade and enabling the transport of bulk commodities that had previously been uneconomical to ship. The empire's road system, maintained by corv labor from conquered territories, improved transportation infrastructure and reduced travel times between major commercial centers. The standardization of commercial practices throughout the empire transformed traditional methods of conducting business. Adian legal codes established uniform procedures for contracts, dispute resolution, and property rights that applied consistently across different regions and cultural groups. These standardized legal frameworks enabled merchants from different backgrounds to conduct business with confidence, knowing that their agreements would be enforced according to predictable legal principles, regardless of local customs or political relationships. the technological innovations that spread throughout the Akkadian Empire. During this period, enhanced production capabilities and improved living standards in many conquered territories. Akkadian metal workers introduced advanced bronze working techniques that produced stronger and more durable tools and weapons. Archaeological analysis of bronze artifacts from Akkadian period shows improved alloy compositions and more sophisticated casting methods that resulted in products superior to earlier Sumerian metal work. Agricultural improvements under Akkadian rule included the introduction of new irrigation technologies and crop varieties that increased productivity. Throughout the empire, Akkadian engineers developed more efficient water management systems that reduced labor requirements while improving crop yields. Archaeological surveys of the Uruk countryside show evidence for expanded cultivation areas and new settlement patterns that reflect these technological improvements. The military organization that maintained Akkadian control over conquered territories represented a significant advance over earlier Mesopotamian warfare methods. Professional soldiers replaced the citizen militias that had characterized Sumerian military forces, creating more effective and reliable fighting units. These professional armies received regular training, standardized equipment, and systematic logistical support that enabled them to campaign effectively over long distances and extended periods. Archaeological evidence from Akkadian military installations shows sophisticated understanding of fortification design and siege warfare techniques. Military engineers constructed standardized fortress designs that could be adapted to different geographical conditions while maintaining consistent defensive capabilities. These fortifications incorporated advanced features such as overlapping fields of fire, protected water supplies, and underground storage facilities that enabled garrisons to withstand extended sieges. The cultural synthesis that emerged during the later Akkadian period produced distinctive artistic styles that combined Sumerian and Akkadian aesthetic traditions. Sculpture from this period demonstrates technical innovations in stone carving and bronze casting while maintaining the symbolic and religious significance of traditional Mesopotamian art. The famous Victory Stele of Nurum Sin, grandson of Sargon, exemplifies this synthetic artistic tradition by depicting the Akkadian king in divine regalia while employing compositional techniques derived from Sumerian artistic conventions. The collapse of the Akkadian Empire around 2154 BC resulted from a combination of internal rebellions, external invasions, and environmental challenges that overwhelmed the administrative and military capabilities that had maintained imperial unity. Archaeological evidence from Uruk shows destruction layers dating to this period, with burned buildings and scattered artifacts indicating violent conflicts associated with the empire's dissolution. However, the cultural synthesis achieved during 2 centuries of Akkadian rule had created lasting changes that would influence Mesopotamian civilization for millennia. The third dynasty of which emerged as the dominant power in southern Mesopotamia following the Akkadian collapse inherited and further developed the administrative innovations and cultural synthesis of the imperial period. Uruk's integration into this Neo-Sumerian Empire around 2112 BC marked another significant transformation in the city's political and cultural development. The Earth 3 rulers, beginning with Uramu and continuing through 5 successive kings, established an administrative system even more centralized and bureaucratic than their Akkadian predecessors. Under Earth 3 administration, Uruk became a crucial provincial center responsible for managing agricultural production and craft manufacturing throughout a substantial territorial district. Archaeological excavations have uncovered massive archive collections containing tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets that document the extraordinary administrative complexity of this period. These records reveal a bureaucratic system that tracked individual workers, monitored daily production quotas, and maintained detailed inventories of stored commodities with unprecedented precision. The religious revival that accompanied the three political dominants restored Sumerian as the primary language for official inscriptions and religious texts while maintaining Addian for certain administrative and commercial purposes. This linguistic policy represented a conscious attempt to revive traditional Sumerian cultural values while incorporating the administrative efficiency and territorial scope achieved during the Akkadian period. Temple construction projects at Uruk during this period combined traditional Sumerian architectural forms with improved engineering techniques developed during the imperial era. The ziggurat reconstruction undertaken by Anemu at Uruk created one of the most impressive religious monuments in ancient Mesopotamia. This massive stepped pyramid rising approximately 50 m above the surrounding plain incorporated advanced construction techniques including fired brick facing, Bumeniumen waterproofing and sophisticated drainage systems. The project required the coordination of thousands of workers over multiple construction seasons and demonstrated the organizational capabilities of the Earth administrative system. Archaeological investigation of the ziggurat construction reveals the systematic planning and resource management that characterized Earth 3 public works projects. Standardized brick sizes and consistent construction techniques indicate centralized production and quality control systems. The transportation of materials from distant quarries and the coordination of specialized craft workers demonstrate logistical capabilities that surpassed even Addian imperial administration in their complexity and efficiency. The economic prosperity that characterized Uruk during the Earth I3 period resulted from intensive agricultural development and expanded craft production under state supervision. Administrative tablets document the systematic cultivation of previously marginal lands through expanded irrigation networks and improved farming techniques. The state-directed economy achieved remarkable productivity levels that supported large non-agricultural populations while generating substantial surpluses for trade and monumental construction. The textile industry at Uruk during this period achieved particular prominence through the production of high-quality wool and fabrics that were traded throughout the ancient Near East. Archaeological evidence shows large-scale wall processing installations that employed hundreds of workers in specialized production tasks. The standardization of textile production techniques and quality control measures enabled Uruk workshops to compete effectively in international markets while meeting domestic demand for clothing and ceremonial fabrics. The gradual decline of the 3 power during the late 22nd century BC created opportunities for new political forces to establish control over Mesopotamian cities. The Amorite invasions that began around 2000 BC brought Semitic-speaking nomadic groups into direct contact with established urban populations, initiating another phase of cultural synthesis and political transformation. These newcomers established independent kingdoms throughout Mesopotamia, with Babylon eventually emerging as the dominant power under Hammurabi's rule. Beginning in 1894 BC, Uruk's incorporation into the Old Babylonian kingdom marked the beginning of the final major phase of the city's ancient history as an independent political entity. Under Babylonian rule, Uruk maintained its religious significance as a major cult center while adapting to new administrative systems and cultural influences. The Code of Hammurabi, one of history's most famous legal documents, applied throughout the Babylonian kingdom, including Uruk, and established standardized legal procedures that influenced judicial practices for centuries. The cultural achievements of the Old Babylonian period at Uruk included significant developments in mathematical and astronomical knowledge that built upon earlier Sumerian and Akkadian intellectual traditions. Cuneiform tablets from this period contain sophisticated mathematical calculations, astronomical observations, and literary compositions that demonstrate the continued vitality of Mesopotamian scholarly traditions under foreign political control. The transition from Babylonian dominance to the rise of Assyrian power around 911 BC marked another crucial transformation in Uruk's long history, as the city adapted once again to new imperial overlords while maintaining its distinctive cultural identity and religious significance. The Neo-Syrian Empire's expansion into southern Mesopotamia during the 9th century BC brought Uruk under the control of rulers whose administrative capabilities and military organization surpassed even their Babylonian predecessors. Assyrian kings beginning with Ad-Nirari II and continuing through the reigns of Tiglath-Pileser III, Sargon II, and Sennacherib established a provincial system that integrated conquered territories into a unified imperial structure while respecting local traditions and religious practices. Archaeological evidence from Uruk's Assyrian period layers reveals extensive reconstruction projects and administrative reorganization that transformed the city into a crucial regional center within the imperial framework. The strategic importance of Uruk within the Assyrian administrative system stemmed from its position at the intersection of major trade routes connecting the Iranian plateau with the Mediterranean coast and its continued role as a primary cult center for several important Mesopotamian deities. Assyrian governors established their headquarters in renovated palace complexes that incorporated traditional Mesopotamian architectural forms with distinctively Assyrian decorative elements. Excavations in the administrative quarter have uncovered throne rooms decorated with stone relief panels depicting royal hunting scenes, and military victories executed in the characteristic Assyrian artistic style, while maintaining the basic structural layouts favored by earlier Mesopotamian rulers. The provincial administration imposed by Assyrian authorities created new opportunities for economic development, while maintaining the cultural continuity that had characterized Uruk throughout its long history. Assyrian officials implemented standardized taxation systems, improved transportation infrastructure, and established security measures that facilitated long-distance trade throughout the empire. Cuneiform tablets from Assyrian period archives document the systematic collection of tribute payments, the organization of corps labor for public works projects, and the coordination of military recruitment that supported imperial campaigns in distant regions. The agricultural reorganization undertaken by Assyrian administrators enhanced productivity throughout Uruk's territorial district through improved irrigation management and the introduction of new cultivation. Archaeological surveys of the surrounding countryside show evidence for expanded canal networks, new settlement patterns, and intensified cultivation that generated substantial surpluses for imperial taxation and local consumption. The systematic exploitation of marginal lands previously considered unsuitable for agriculture demonstrated the advanced hydraulic engineering capabilities that Assyrian administrators brought to conquered territories. Assyrian military engineers constructed new fortification systems that protected Uruk against potential rebellions and foreign invasions while serving as bases for imperial forces operating throughout southern Mesopotamia. These defensive installations incorporated advanced siege warfare technologies, including overlapping defensive positions, protected water supplies, and underground storage facilities that could sustain garrisons during extended conflicts. Archaeological investigation of these fortifications reveals construction techniques and defensive strategies that reflected centuries of military experience gained through Assyrian campaigns across the ancient Near East. The religious policies implemented by Assyrian rulers demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the political importance of maintaining traditional cult practices while asserting imperial authority over conquered populations. Rather than imposing Assyrian religious traditions, imperial administrators adopted syncretic approaches that honored local deities while incorporating them into broader imperial religious frameworks. The result was an enriched spiritual tradition that satisfied local religious sensibilities while reinforcing political loyalty to Assyrian overlords. Temple reconstruction projects undertaken during the Assyrian period at Uruk combined traditional Mesopotamian religious architecture with improved engineering techniques and enhanced decorative programs. The renovation of the Yana temple complex involved the construction of new ceremonial chambers, the installation of elaborate drainage systems, and the creation of sculptural programs that depicted both traditional Sumerian religious scenes and contemporary Assyrian royal imagery. These building campaigns required the coordination of hundreds of specialized craftsmen and the importation of materials from throughout the empire, demonstrating the substantial resources that Assyrian authorities devoted to maintaining religious institutions in conquered territories. The cuneiform libraries established at Uruk during the Assyrian period preserved and transmitted the intellectual heritage of earlier Mesopotamian civilizations while contributing new scholarly achievements. In mathematics, astronomy, and literature, Assyrian royal patronage supported scribal schools that trained administrators capable of managing the complex bureaucratic requirements of imperial government while maintaining traditional scholarly disciplines. These educational institutions produced ununiform tablets containing advanced mathematical treatises, detailed astronomical observations, and literary compositions that built upon centuries of accumulated knowledge. Archaeological excavations in the temple school areas have uncovered extensive tablet collections containing mathematical exercises, astronomical calculations, and literary texts that demonstrate the sophisticated educational curriculum employed during this period. Student exercises show systematic instruction in numerical calculations, geometric principles, and algebraic problem-solving techniques that enabled graduates to handle complex administrative tasks. Advanced mathematical tablets contain solutions to problems involving compound interest, area calculations, and volume measurements that required sophisticated understanding of mathematical principles. The astronomical observations recorded at Uruk during the Assyrian period contributed significantly to the development of systematic celestial studies that would influence scientific traditions throughout the ancient world. Cuneiform tablets document detailed observations of planetary movements, lunar cycles, and stellar positions that enable the creation of accurate kendrical systems and the prediction of celestial events. These astronomical records demonstrate the systematic data collection and analytical methods that characterized Mesopotamian scientific traditions during their most sophisticated phase. The maintenance of Sumerian cultural traditions within the Assyrian imperial framework represented a remarkable achievement in cultural preservation that ensured the continuity of ancient intellectual and religious heritage. Temple schools continued to teach Sumerian language and literature to new generations of priests and scholars. while scribal workshops produced copies of classical texts that preserve traditional knowledge for future transmission. This cultural continuity enabled Uruk to maintain its distinctive identity despite centuries of foreign political control. The economic prosperity that characterized Uruk during the Assyrian period resulted from the city's integration into imperial trade networks that connected distant regions of the ancient world. Assyrian military protection enabled merchants to transport goods safely across vast distances, while standardized commercial practices facilitated transactions between traders from different cultural backgrounds. Archaeological evidence shows increased quantities of imported goods, including precious metals, exotic stones, and luxury manufactured items that demonstrate Uruk's participation in international commerce. Craft production at Uruk during this period achieved new levels of technical sophistication through the introduction of improved manufacturing techniques and the availability of raw materials from throughout the Assyrian Empire. Workshops produced high-quality textiles, metalwork, and ceramic goods that competed successfully in regional markets while meeting local demand for manufactured products. The standardization of production methods and quality control measures enabled Uruk craftsmen to achieve consistent results while increasing output volumes to meet growing commercial opportunities. The collapse of Assyrian power during the late 7th century BC created opportunities for the emergence of new political forces that would reshape the ancient Near Eastern political landscape. The Neo-Ablonian Empire, established by Nabopolassar in 626 BC and expanded by his successors, inherited much of the former Assyrian territorial domain while implementing new administrative approaches that emphasized cultural revival and monumental construction projects. Incorporation into this new imperial system marked the beginning of another significant phase in the city's development. Under Neo-Ablonian rule, Uruk experienced a remarkable religious and cultural revival that restored the city to a position of prominence within Mesopotamian civilization. Nebuchadnezzar II, the most powerful of the Neo-Ablonian rulers, undertook massive construction projects throughout his empire that included extensive renovations and expansions of religious complexes at Uruk. These building campaigns represented conscious attempts to revive traditional Mesopotamian cultural values while demonstrating the wealth and power of the new imperial dynasty. The reconstruction of major temple complexes at Uruk during Nebuchadnezzar's reign involved the most ambitious building projects undertaken at the site since the III period over a millennium earlier. The renovation of the Anu ziggurat incorporated advanced engineering techniques that created a structure even more impressive than its predecessors. Archaeological investigation of the construction phases reveals systematic planning and resource management that coordinated the efforts of thousands of workers over multiple construction seasons. The temple reconstruction projects extended beyond mere structural renovation to include comprehensive restoration of religious practices and ceremonial traditions that had been neglected during periods of political instability. Neo-Ablonian rulers invested substantial resources in re-establishing traditional festival cycles, reconstructing ritual equipment, and training new generations of priests capable of maintaining complex ceremonial requirements. The religious revival efforts strengthened popular support for the new dynasty while reinforcing Uruk's traditional role as a major cult center. The economic foundation supporting these ambitious construction projects rested on the continued agricultural productivity and expanded commercial relationships that characterized the Neo-Ablonian period. Administrative reforms implemented by Nebuchadnezzar and his successors improved taxation efficiency, enhanced transportation infrastructure, and established security. Measures that protected commercial activities throughout the empire. Archaeological evidence shows increased settlement density in the Uruk countryside and expanded cultivation areas that generated substantial agricultural surpluses. The international trade relationships that flourished during the Neo-Ablonian period connected Uruk with commercial networks extending from the Mediterranean coast to the Indian Ocean. Babylonian merchants established trading posts in distant cities while foreign traders brought exotic goods and new technologies to Mesopotamian markets. Cuneiform tablets document complex commercial transactions involving precious metals, luxury manufactured goods, and bulk commodities that demonstrate the sophisticated financial instruments and legal frameworks that supported long-distance trade. The scholarly achievements and monumental construction projects that characterized Uruk during the Neo-Ablonian period came to an abrupt end with the arrival of Cyrus the Great's Persian forces in 539 BC. Unlike previous conquests that had devastated the city through prolonged sieges and violent destruction, the Persian takeover of Uruk occurred with remarkable efficiency and minimal physical damage to the urban infrastructure. Archaeological evidence from this transitional period shows no significant destruction layers or burned buildings, indicating that the city's surrender was negotiated rather than forced through military assault. Cuneiform tablets dating to the final months of Babylonian rule document the systematic withdrawal of Neo-Ablonian administrators and the peaceful transfer of authority to Persian officials, suggesting that local leaders had recognized the futility of resistance against Cyrus's expanding empire. The administrative integration of Uruk into the Amanid Persian Empire represented a masterpiece of imperial organization that balanced centralized control with respect for local traditions and autonomous governance structures. Cyrus's conquest strategy, later codified in the famous Cyrus Cylinder, explicitly guaranteed the preservation of local religious practices, cultural institutions, and traditional administrative arrangements within conquered territories. This policy of cultural tolerance proved particularly effective at Uruk, where centuries of foreign rule had created sophisticated mechanisms for adapting to new political overlords while maintaining essential aspects of Mesopotamian identity. The Persian satrap system implemented throughout the Amanid Empire divided vast territorial domains into manageable administrative units governed by appointed officials responsible directly to the Persian king. Uruk became part of the extensive satrapy of Babylonia, which encompassed most of southern Mesopotamia and portions of the Iranian plateau. The satrap appointed to govern this crucial region typically held the rank of Persian noble and commanded substantial military forces, but operated within policy frameworks that emphasize cooperation with local elites rather than direct administrative control over daily governance activities. Archaeological excavations in Uruk's administrative quarter have uncovered evidence for the systematic renovation of governmental buildings during the early Persian period. Persian architects and engineers modified existing palace complexes to accommodate new administrative requirements while preserving the basic structural arrangements that had served Mesopotamian rulers for centuries. The most significant changes involve the construction of new audience chambers designed according to Persian ceremonial protocols, featuring raised platforms for royal representatives and elaborate decorative programs that combine traditional Mesopotamian artistic motifs with distinctively Persian symbolic elements. The Persian administrative compound constructed adjacent to the traditional palace area incorporated architectural features characteristic of Amanid governmental buildings throughout the empire. Excavations have revealed a rectangular complex measuring approximately 150 x 200 m surrounded by high walls and entered through a single monumental gateway, decorated with glazed brick reliefs depicting Persian royal imagery. The interior layout featured a central courtyard surrounded by administrative offices, residential quarters for Persian officials, and storage facilities for tax collection and record-keeping. The most impressive architectural element within this Persian administrative complex was the Apodina, or audience hall. Constructed according to standardized designs employed throughout the Achaemenid Empire, this massive hyperstyle hall measured 60 by 40 m and featured 36 stone columns supporting a cedar beam roof system imported from Lebanese mountains. The columns carved from local limestone but following Persian artistic conventions incorporated distinctive bell-shaped capitals decorated with stylized animal figures including bulls, lions, and eagles that symbolized imperial power and divine protection. The integration of Persian administrative personnel with existing Mesopotamian bureaucratic structures created a dual governmental system that maximized administrative efficiency while maintaining political stability. Persian officials assumed responsibility for military affairs, tax collection, and communication with the imperial court at Papilolis, while traditional Mesopotamian administrators continued to manage local judicial proceedings, religious ceremonies, and community affairs. This division of responsibilities prevented conflicts between imperial requirements and local customs while ensuring that Persian interests received appropriate attention from competent officials familiar with regional conditions. Ununiform archives from the Persian period at Uruk document the systematic adaptation of traditional Mesopotamian record-keeping practices to accommodate Persian administrative requirements. Scribal schools modified their curricula to include instruction in Aramaic, the official administrative language of the Persian Empire, while maintaining traditional training in Akkadian and Sumerian for local governmental and religious purposes. Bilingual tablets from this period show Persian tax assessments recorded in Aramaic alongside traditional Mesopotamian legal documents, written in Akkadian demonstrating the practical accommodation between imperial and local administrative traditions. The Persian taxation system implemented at Uruk represented a significant departure from earlier Mesopotamian fiscal practices through its emphasis on monetary payments rather than tribute in. Archaeological evidence shows the construction of new mint facilities, where silver coins were produced according to Persian weight standards and bearing imperial imagery. The coins known as siglo featured the image of the Persian king on one side and symbolic representations of Ahura Mazda, the chief deity of the Persian religious system, on the reverse. The introduction of standardized coinage facilitated commercial transactions throughout the empire while providing Persian authorities with convenient methods for collecting and transporting tax revenues. The agricultural administration of Uruk's territorial district under Persian rule involved systematic surveys of cultivated lands and the establishment of standardized assessment procedures that determine tax obligations based on agricultural productivity. Persian surveyors working in cooperation with local officials familiar with traditional irrigation systems and cultivation patterns created detailed cadastral records that documented property boundaries, water rights, and crop yields for individual agricultural holdings. These surveys recorded on cuneiform tablets using both Aramaic and Akkadian scripts provided the foundation for equitable taxation while protecting traditional property rights. Archaeological investigation of Persian period irrigation systems shows evidence for significant improvements in water management technology that increased agricultural productivity throughout the Uruk region. Persian engineers introduced new canal construction techniques that reduced water loss through seepage and improved the reliability of water delivery to distant agricultural areas. The construction of stone line channels and the installation of bronze sluice gates enabled more precise control of water distribution, while improved maintenance procedures ensured the long-term functionality of irrigation infrastructure. The religious tolerance that characterized Persian imperial policy found particularly favorable expression at Uruk, where traditional Mesopotamian cult practices continued without interruption under Persian rule. The Anna temple complex, dedicated to Inanna, maintained its traditional ceremonial cycles, priestly hierarchies, and property holdings under Persian protection. Archaeological evidence shows continued temple construction and renovation projects during the Persian period, indicating that religious institutions retained access to substantial financial resources and enjoyed official support from imperial authorities. Persian religious policy at Uruk involved the careful integration of traditional Mesopotamian deities into broader imperial religious frameworks, without compromising the essential characteristics of local spiritual traditions. The Persian concept of religious pluralism derived from Zoroastrian theological principles that recognized the validity of different paths to divine truth, provided ideological justification for supporting local cult practices while maintaining imperial unity. This approach proved particularly effective in Mesopotamia, where religious diversity had been a characteristic feature of urban civilization for millennia. The reconstruction of the Anu ziggurat during the Persian period represents one of the most ambitious temple construction projects undertaken at Uruk since the Neo-Ablonian era. Persian authorities provided substantial financial support for this massive undertaking, which involved the complete rebuilding of the stepped pyramid structure using improved engineering techniques and higher quality materials. Archaeological investigation of the construction phases reveals the systematic planning and resource management that characterized Persian public works projects throughout the empire. The ziggurat reconstruction incorporated architectural innovations that reflected Persian engineering capabilities while maintaining the traditional Mesopotamian symbolic and religious significance of the structure. The foundation system employed large stone blocks quarried from distant mountainous regions and transported to Uruk via the extensive Persian road network. The superstructure combined traditional mud brick construction with fired brick facing and pitchman waterproofing that provided enhanced durability and weather resistance. The completed structure rose approximately 60 m above the surrounding plain and featured elaborate staircases, ceremonial chambers, and decorative elements that demonstrated the wealth and technical capabilities available to Persian-sponsored construction projects. The Persian period at Uruk witnessed significant developments in craft production and manufacturing that reflected both imperial economic policies and local technological innovations. Persian authorities encouraged the expansion of textile production through the introduction of new weaving techniques and the importation of raw materials from distant regions of the empire. Archaeological excavations in workshop areas have uncovered evidence for large-scale wool and linen processing facilities that employed hundreds of workers in specialized production tasks. The standardization of manufacturing techniques under Persian administration enabled Uruk craftsmen to compete effectively in imperial markets while meeting growing demand for high-quality manufactured goods. Persian quality control measures and standardized measurement systems ensured consistent product characteristics, while improved transportation infrastructure reduced the costs of distributing finished goods to distant markets. Ununiform tablets document export contracts for Uruk textiles, metalwork, and ceramic. Products destined for markets throughout the Persian Empire from Egypt to Central Asia. The metalwork industry at Uruk during the Persian period achieved particular prominence through the production of bronze and iron implements that incorporated advanced Persian metallurgical techniques. Archaeological analysis of metal artifacts from this period shows improved alloy compositions and sophisticated manufacturing processes that produce tools and weapons superior to earlier Mesopotamian metal. The introduction of iron working technology previously limited in Mesopotamian contexts enabled the production of agricultural implements and construction tools that enhance productivity in various economic sectors. Persian period archaeological deposits at Uruk contain substantial quantities of imported goods that demonstrate the city's integration into imperial trade networks spanning 3 continents. Excavations have uncovered Persian luxury items, including carved stone, vessels, precious metal jewelry, and silk textiles that arrived via trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with Central Asia and the Far East. Egyptian artifacts including fans objects, carved stone amulets, and papyrus documents indicate commercial relationships with the Nile Valley, while Indian materials such as ivory carvings and precious stones demonstrate connections with South Asian markets. The educational institutions that flourished at Uruk during the Persian period combined traditional Mesopotamian scholarly disciplines with new intellectual currents introduced through imperial cultural exchange. Temple schools expanded their curricula to include instruction in Persian literature, Zoroastrian religious texts, and administrative practices employed throughout the empire. Archaeological excavations in educational facilities have uncovered tablet collections containing Persian royal inscriptions, Zoroastrian prayers, and administrative handbooks that supplemented traditional Mesopotamian educational materials. The mathematical and astronomical achievements of Persian period scholars at Uruk built upon centuries of accumulated Mesopotamian knowledge while incorporating new observational data and computational techniques developed throughout the empire. Cuneiform tablets from this period contain sophisticated astronomical calculations that enabled accurate prediction of celestial events and the creation of reliable chondrical systems. These scholarly achievements contributed to the development of mathematical astronomy that would influence scientific traditions throughout the Hellenistic world. The legal system that operated at Uruk under Persian administration combined traditional Mesopotamian jurisprudence with imperial legal codes that applied throughout the Achaemenid Empire. Persian authorities established courts that handled cases involving imperial interests, interstate disputes, and conflicts between individuals from different ethnic or cultural backgrounds. While traditional Mesopotamian legal institutions continued to manage local civil and criminal matters, this dual legal system provided comprehensive judicial coverage, while respecting established legal traditions and community customs. Archaeological evidence from Persian period legal archives shows the systematic documentation of property transfers, commercial contracts, and judicial proceedings using standardized legal formulas and procedures. These records demonstrate the sophisticated legal frameworks that supported commercial activities and maintained social order within the complex multi-ethnic environment of the Persian Empire. The preservation of traditional Mesopotamian legal concepts alongside Persian imperial law created flexible judicial systems that could accommodate diverse cultural expectations while maintaining consistent standards of justice. The urban development that occurred at Uruk during the Persian period reflected both imperial investment in infrastructure improvements and continued population growth that required expanded Residential and commercial facilities. Archaeological surveys show evidence for new residential districts constructed according to planned layouts that incorporated Persian urban design principles while maintaining traditional Mesopotamian architectural forms. These new neighborhoods featured improved drainage systems, wider streets, and standardized building plots that enhanced living conditions while accommodating increased population density. The commercial quarter of Persian period Uruk expanded significantly through the construction of new market facilities, warehouse complexes, and workshop areas that supported growing trade volumes and manufacturing activities. Archaeological excavations have uncovered standardized shop units arranged around central courtyards, large storage buildings with sophisticated inventory management systems and specialized production facilities for various craft industries. These commercial developments demonstrate the economic prosperity that characterized Uruk during its integration into the Persian imperial system. The Persian road system that connected Uruk with other major cities throughout the empire facilitated unprecedented levels of communication and transportation that transformed the city's relationships with distant regions. The famous Royal Road, which extended from Sardis in western Anatolia to Susa in southwestern Iran, passed through Mesopotamia and provided Uruk with direct access to imperial communication networks. Archaeological investigation of road construction techniques reveals sophisticated engineering approaches that created durable transportation infrastructure capable of supporting heavy commercial traffic and rapid military movement. The postal system established by Persian authorities enabled regular communication between Uruk and the imperial capital at Pepalolis, facilitating coordination of administrative activities and ensuring that local developments received appropriate attention from central authorities. Cuneiform tablets document the systematic transmission of governmental correspondence, commercial information, and intelligence reports that maintained effective imperial control while respecting local autonomy. This communication system represented one of the most advanced information networks in the ancient world and contributed significantly to the administrative efficiency of the Persian Empire. The sophisticated communication networks and administrative efficiency that characterize Persian rule at Uruk faced unprecedented challenges when Alexander the Great's Macedonian forces crossed the Hellespont in 334 BC, initiating a campaign that would fundamentally transform the political and cultural landscape of the ancient Near East. The news of Alexander's victories at Granicus and Issus reached Uruk through the Persian postal system months before. The Macedonian army approached Mesopotamia, providing local administrators with sufficient time to prepare for the inevitable confrontation between Persian imperial forces and the advancing Greek coalition. The Battle of Gaugamela, fought on October 1, 331 BC, approximately 100 kilometers north of Uruk, marked the decisive moment when Persian control over Mesopotamia collapsed under Alexander's tactical brilliance and the superior discipline of Macedonian military formations. Archaeological evidence from battlefield surveys conducted in the 20th century has uncovered scattered weapons, armor fragments, and horse equipment that provide physical testimony to the scale and intensity of this pivotal engagement. Persian forces under Darius III, despite their numerical superiority and advantageous defensive positioning, proved unable to counter the coordinated assault of Macedonian phalanxes supported by the Elean cavalry and allied Greek contingents. The immediate aftermath of Gamala created a power vacuum throughout southern Mesopotamia that Alexander filled through a combination of diplomatic negotiation and strategic occupation of key urban centers. Uruk's surrender to Macedonian forces occurred without significant resistance, as local leaders recognized the futility of opposing an army that had just destroyed the Persian Empire's primary military force. Cuneiform tablets from this transitional period document the systematic transfer of administrative authority from Persian officials to Macedonian military governors, indicating that the changeover proceeded according to established protocols rather than through violent conquest. Alexander's personal visit to Uruk in late 331 BC demonstrated his sophisticated understanding of Mesopotamian political traditions and religious practices. Unlike previous conquerors who had imposed foreign administrative systems, Alexander adopted a syncretic approach that combined Macedonian military authority with traditional Mesopotamian governmental structures. Archaeological excavations in the palace quarter have uncovered evidence for hasty renovations undertaken to accommodate Alexander's entourage, including the construction of new reception halls designed according to Macedonian court protocols while maintaining the basic architectural arrangements that had served earlier rulers. The religious policies implemented by Alexander at Uruk reflected his broader strategy of legitimizing Macedonian rule through adoption of local spiritual traditions and ceremonial practices. Rather than suppressing traditional Mesopotamian cult activities, Alexander participated in established religious festivals and provided financial support for temple maintenance and construction projects. The famous scene of Alexander's sacrifice to Marduk at Babylon was replicated at Uruk with appropriate ceremonies honoring Anu and Inanna, demonstrating the conqueror's recognition of religious authority as a crucial component of political legitimacy. The death of Alexander in Babylon in 323 BC initiated a period of political fragmentation that ultimately resulted in the establishment of Seleucid control over Mesopotamia under Sucus I. Nicator, one of Alexander's most capable generals and successors. The Wars of the Diadochi, which consumed the eastern Mediterranean and Near East for over 2 decades following Alexander's death, had profound implications for Uruk's development as competing Macedonian commanders struggled to establish permanent control over the wealthy Mesopotamian territories. Seleucus's consolidation of power in Mesopotamia around 305 BC marked the beginning of a new phase in Uruk's history, characterized by systematic Hellenization combined with preservation of essential Mesopotamian cultural traditions. The Seleucid administrative system established at Uruk incorporated Greek governmental concepts and personnel while maintaining traditional Mesopotamian bureaucratic structures that had proven effective under previous imperial regimes. This dual administrative approach enabled efficient governance while preventing the cultural conflicts that might have resulted from more radical political transformation. The establishment of Greek colonies throughout the Seleucid Empire brought substantial numbers of Greek-speaking settlers to Mesopotamia, fundamentally altering the demographic composition of major urban centers, including Uruk. Archaeological evidence from residential districts shows the construction of new housing complexes designed according to Greek architectural principles, featuring central courtyards surrounded by rooms arranged according to Hellenistic domestic arrangements. These Greek residential areas were typically located in separate districts from traditional Mesopotamian neighborhoods, creating ethnically distinct communities within the larger urban framework. The Greek settlers who arrived at Uruk during the early Seleucid period included military veterans granted land holdings in recognition of their service, skilled craftsmen attracted by economic opportunities, and administrative personnel appointed to governmental positions. Cuneiform and Greek inscriptions from This period documents the systematic distribution of agricultural estates to Greek colonists, the establishment of Greek craft workshops, and the creation of educational institutions that provided instruction in Greek language and culture for both immigrant and indigenous populations. The architectural transformation of Uruk under Seleucid rule involved the construction of distinctively Greek public buildings that serve new social and cultural functions within the traditional Mesopotamian urban environment. The most significant of these projects was the gymnasium, a massive complex measuring approximately 200 x 150 m that provided facilities for athletic training, educational activities, and social gatherings according to established Greek cultural practices. Archaeological excavations have revealed a sophisticated architectural program that included exercise areas, bathing facilities, lecture halls, and library spaces designed to serve the Greek community's cultural and educational needs. The gymnasium complex incorporated advanced engineering techniques that demonstrated Greek expertise in hydraulic systems and structural design. The bathing facilities featured elaborate hot and cold water systems supplied by aqueducts that brought fresh water from distant sources, while sophisticated drainage networks removed wastewater and maintained sanitary conditions. The exercise areas included a standard running track, wrestling grounds, and equipment storage facilities that enable the full range of athletic activities characteristic of Greek gymnasium. The construction of a Greek theater at Uruk represented another significant addition to the city's architectural landscape, providing a venue for dramatic performances and public assemblies. According to Hellenistic cultural traditions, the theater carved into a natural hillside adjacent to the main urban area featured a semicircular seating arrangement that could accommodate approximately 5,000 spectators. The stage area incorporated sophisticated acoustic design principles that ensured clear sound transmission throughout the seating area, while elaborate decorative programs featured Greek mythological themes executed by skilled sculptors and painters. The educational institutions established at Uruk during the Seleucid period created systematic programs for transmitting Greek cultural knowledge while preserving traditional Mesopotamian scholarly disciplines. The gymnasium school provided instruction in Greek literature, philosophy, mathematics, and rhetoric for students from both Greek and indigenous backgrounds. Archaeological excavations in educational facilities have uncovered extensive collections of Greek literary texts, philosophical treatises, and scientific works that demonstrate the comprehensive curriculum employed in these institutions. The preservation of traditional Mesopotamian educational traditions alongside Greek instruction created a unique intellectual environment that fostered cultural synthesis and scholarly innovation. Temple schools continue to provide training in ununiform writing, traditional mathematical techniques, and Mesopotamian religious literature while also offering instruction in Greek language and Hellenistic scholarly methods. This educational diversity enabled students to master both cultural traditions and contributed to the development of synthetic intellectual approaches that combined Greek and Mesopotamian knowledge systems. The economic integration of Uruk into Mediterranean trade networks under Seleucid rule transformed traditional commercial relationships and created new opportunities for economic development. Greek merchants established trading partnerships with Mesopotamian counterparts, facilitating the exchange of goods between the Eastern Mediterranean and the Iranian plateau. Archaeological evidence shows increased quantities of Greek manufactured goods, including pottery, metalwork, and luxury items, alongside continued production and export of traditional Mesopotamian products such as textiles, agricultural commodities, and craft goods. The introduction of Greek commercial practices and legal frameworks enhanced the efficiency of long-distance trade while providing standardized procedures for conducting business across cultural boundaries. Greek contract law, with its emphasis on written agreements and standardized dispute resolution procedures, complemented traditional Mesopotamian commercial customs and created comprehensive legal frameworks for complex transactions. Bilingual contracts written in both Greek and Aramaic demonstrate the practical accommodation between different legal traditions and commercial practices. The monetary system implemented throughout the Seleucid Empire standardized currency values and facilitated commercial transactions across vast distances. Silver coins minted at Uruk during this period featured Greek artistic styles and inscriptions while incorporating traditional Mesopotamian symbolic elements that maintained cultural continuity. The standardization of weights, measures, and currency systems enabled merchants to conduct business with confidence throughout the empire while reducing transaction costs and commercial uncertainties. The religious synthesis that developed at Uruk under Seleucid rule created distinctive theological traditions that combined Greek philosophical concepts with traditional Mesopotamian spiritual practices. The identification of Greek deities with Mesopotamian gods facilitated religious accommodation while preserving the essential characteristics of both traditions. Anu became associated with Zeus as the supreme sky deity, while Inanna was identified with Aphrodite as the goddess of love and fertility, creating theological frameworks that satisfied both Greek and Mesopotamian religious sensibilities. The temple construction projects undertaken during the Seleucid period incorporated Greek architectural elements into traditional Mesopotamian religious structures, creating distinctive synthetic building styles. The renovation of the Yana temple complex included the addition of Greek-style columns, decorative friezes featuring classical mythological themes, and improved lighting systems that enhanced the visual impact of religious ceremonies. These architectural modifications demonstrated respect for traditional religious functions while introducing aesthetic innovations that appealed to Greek cultural preferences. The gradual decline of ununiform literacy during the Seleucid period reflected broader cultural changes that accompanied Hellenization while preserving essential aspects of Mesopotamian intellectual traditions. Greek alphabetic writing systems proved more efficient for many administrative and commercial purposes, leading to the gradual replacement of ununiform for routine record-keeping activities. However, ununiform continued to be employed for religious texts, scholarly works, and traditional legal documents, ensuring the preservation of ancient knowledge systems within specialized intellectual communities. The astronomical and mathematical achievements of Seleucid period scholars at Uruk represented the culmination of centuries of Mesopotamian scientific development enhanced by Greek theoretical approaches and observational views. The combination of traditional Mesopotamian computational methods with Greek geometric principles produced sophisticated mathematical models that enabled accurate prediction of celestial phenomena and the creation of precise cylindrical systems. These scientific achievements contributed to the development of Hellenistic astronomy and mathematics that would influence scholarly traditions throughout the Mediterranean world. The urban planning initiatives undertaken at Uruk during the Seleucid period created new residential and commercial districts that accommodated growing populations, while maintaining the essential character of the traditional Mesopotamian city. Greek urban design principles emphasizing geometric street layouts and standardized building plots were adapted to local environmental conditions and cultural preferences. The result was a distinctive urban landscape that combined Hellenistic planning concepts with traditional Mesopotamian architectural forms and spatial arrangements. The demographic changes that occurred at Uruk during the Susid period created a cosmopolitan urban environment that included substantial populations of Greeks, Mesopotamians, and other ethnic groups from throughout the empire. Marriage relationships between Greek settlers and indigenous inhabitants produced mixed populations that served as cultural intermediaries and facilitated communication between different ethnic communities. Archaeological evidence from cemetery sites shows burial practices that combined Greek and Mesopotamian traditions, indicating the emergence of synthetic cultural identities among these mixed populations. The military installations that secured Susid authority throughout Mesopotamia underwent systematic reorganization when Parthian forces under Mithrates I crossed the Zagros Mountains in 141 BC, initiating a campaign that would permanently alter the political landscape of the Iranian plateau and Mesopotamia. The Parthian conquest of Uruk occurred not through a single decisive battle, but through a gradual process of territorial acquisition that exploited Seleucid military weaknesses and administrative instability. Archaeological evidence from destruction layers dating to this period shows limited physical damage to urban infrastructure, suggesting that Uruk's surrender followed negotiated terms, rather than prolonged siege warfare. The Assassid dynasty's approach to governing conquered territories differed significantly from earlier imperial systems through its emphasis on decentralized administration and cultural accommodation. Parthian rulers themselves originally nomadic peoples from the Iranian steppes possess sophisticated understanding of the challenges involved in governing sedentary agricultural populations with established urban traditions, rather than imposing uniform administrative structures throughout their expanding empire. Parthian authorities adapted their governmental methods to local conditions while maintaining strategic control over military affairs and taxation systems. The establishment of Parthian administration at Uruk involved the appointment of local governors who combined traditional Mesopotamian administrative experience with loyalty to our assassin political objectives. These officials, typically drawn from established urban elites who had demonstrated competence under previous regimes, maintained existing bureaucratic procedures while implementing new policies that reflected Parthian strategic priorities. Ununiform tablets from early Parthian period archives document the systematic adaptation of Seleucid administrative practices to accommodate Parthian governmental requirements, indicating continuity in routine administrative functions despite fundamental changes in political authority. The strategic importance of Uruk within the Parthian Empire stemmed from its position along crucial trade routes connecting the Iranian plateau with Mesopotamian agricultural regions and its continued significance as a major religious center. Parthian military engineers constructed new fortification systems that integrated the city into broader defensive networks designed to protect against Roman expansion eastward. These fortifications incorporated advanced siege warfare technologies, including overlapping defensive positions, underground water supplies, and communication systems that enabled coordination with other Parthian strongholds throughout the region. Archaeological investigations of Parthian period fortifications reveal construction techniques that combined Iranian military engineering traditions with adaptations to local environmental conditions. The main defensive wall surrounding Uruk measured approximately 12 kilometers in circumference and incorporated both natural topographical features and artificial earthworks to create comprehensive protective barriers. Stone foundations supported mud brick superstructures reinforced with timber frameworks while projecting bastions. Provided platforms for defensive artillery and archer positions that could engage attackers at extended ranges. Economic integration of Uruk into Parthian commercial networks created unprecedented opportunities for long-distance trade while maintaining traditional agricultural and craft production systems. Parthian control over the Silk Road trade routes that connected China with Mediterranean markets enabled Uruk merchants to participate in lucrative commercial relationships extending across 3 continents. Archaeological deposits from this period contain substantial quantities of Chinese silk, Indian precious stones, and Roman manufactured goods alongside traditional Mesopotamian products, demonstrating the city's integration into international trade networks of extraordinary geographical scope. The Parthian period witnessed significant developments in craft production that reflected both technological innovations and changing market demands. Metalwork shops at Uruk adopted new techniques for producing steel, implements, and weapons that incorporated Iranian metallurgical knowledge with traditional Mesopotamian manufacturing methods. Archaeological analysis of metal artifacts from this period shows improved alloy compositions and sophisticated heat treatment processes that produce tools and weapons superior to earlier products. The standardization of manufacturing techniques enabled Uruk craftsmen to compete effectively in imperial markets, while meeting growing demand for high-quality manufactured goods. Textile production during the Parthian period achieved particular prominence through the development of new weaving techniques and the introduction of exotic raw materials from distant regions. Workshops produced silk fabrics, using techniques learned from Chinese artisans, while traditional wool and linen production continued to supply local and regional markets. Archaeological excavations in textile production areas have uncovered sophisticated dyeing installations that processed imported colorants, including Indian indigo, Phoenician purple, and various mineral pigments that created textiles of exceptional beauty and commercial value. The religious policies implemented by Parthian authorities at Uruk demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the political importance of maintaining traditional cult practices while accommodating new spiritual influences from Iranian religious traditions. Zoroastrian concepts gradually influenced Mesopotamian theological development without displacing established deities or ceremonial practices. The result was a syncretic religious environment that satisfied traditional spiritual needs while incorporating new theological concepts that enhanced rather than contradicted existing belief systems. Temple construction projects undertaken during the Parthian period combined traditional Mesopotamian religious architecture with Iranian decorative elements and improved engineering techniques. The renovation of major temple complexes involved the installation of fire altars for Zoroastrian ceremonial purposes, alongside traditional Mesopotamian ritual equipment. Archaeological evidence shows careful integration of different religious traditions that created comprehensive spiritual environments capable of serving diverse religious communities within the same architectural frameworks. The Anna Temple complex underwent extensive modification during the early Parthian period to accommodate new ceremonial requirements while preserving traditional religious functions. Brunian architects introduced distinctive decorative programs featuring stylized animal motifs, geometric patterns, and symbolic representations of light and darkness that reflected Zoroastrian theological concepts. These decorative elements were integrated with traditional Mesopotamian religious imagery to create comprehensive artistic programs that communicated complex theological messages to worshippers from different cultural backgrounds. The educational institutions that flourished at Uruk during the Parthian period combined Mesopotamian scholarly traditions with Iranian intellectual developments and residual Greek educational practices inherited from the Susid era. Temple schools expanded their curricula to include instruction in Middle Persian language and literature while maintaining traditional training in cuneiform writing and Mesopotamian religious texts. This multilingual educational environment produced scholars capable of serving administrative, religious, and commercial functions within the complex cultural landscape of the Parthian Empire. Archaeological excavations in educational facilities have uncovered extensive tablet collections containing mathematical exercises, astronomical observations, and literary compositions that demonstrate the continued vitality of Mesopotamian intellectual traditions. Under Parthian rule, advanced mathematical texts show sophisticated computational techniques that enabled accurate calculation of compound interest, geometric measurements, and astronomical predictions. These scholarly achievements contributed to the preservation and transmission of ancient knowledge systems while facilitating practical applications in commercial, agricultural, and administrative contexts. The astronomical observations conducted at Uruk during the Parthian period built upon centuries of accumulated Mesopotamian scientific knowledge while incorporating new observational techniques and theoretical frameworks developed throughout the empire. Parthian astronomers maintained detailed records of planetary movements, lunar cycles, and stellar positions that enabled the creation of accurate cylindrical systems and the prediction of celestial events. These scientific activities contributed to the development of mathematical astronomy that influenced scholarly traditions throughout the Hellenistic and Roman worlds. Cuneiform tablets from Parthian period astronomical archives contain sophisticated mathematical models that enabled precise calculation of planetary positions and the timing of eclipses. These computational techniques represented the culmination of Mesopotamian mathematical astronomy and demonstrated the continued intellectual vitality of traditional scholarly disciplines under foreign political control. The systematic collection and analysis of observational data created comprehensive databases that supported both practical applications and theoretical investigations of celestial phenomena. The legal system that operated at Uruk under Parthian administration combined traditional Mesopotamian jurisprudence with Iranian legal concepts and residual Greek legal practices inherited from the Susid period. Parthian authorities established courts that handled cases involving imperial interests and disputes between individuals from different ethnic or cultural backgrounds. While traditional Mesopotamian legal institutions continue to manage local civil and criminal matters, this complex legal environment required sophisticated understanding of multiple legal traditions and created opportunities for legal innovation and synthesis. Archaeological evidence from Parthian period legal archives shows the systematic documentation of property transfers, commercial contracts, and judicial proceedings using standardized legal formulas that accommodated diverse cultural expectations. These records demonstrate the flexible legal frameworks that supported commercial activities and maintained social order within the multi-ethnic environment of the Parthian Empire. The preservation of traditional legal concepts alongside Iranian and Greek legal principles created comprehensive judicial systems that could address complex legal situations involving multiple cultural traditions. The urban Development that occurred at Uruk during the Parthian period reflected both imperial investment in infrastructure, improvements, and continued population growth that required expanded residential and commercial facilities. New residential districts constructed during this period incorporated Iranian architectural elements, including distinctive window arrangements, improved ventilation systems, and decorative programs that reflected Persian aesthetic preferences. These neighborhoods featured planned layouts with standardized building plots and improved drainage systems that enhanced living conditions while accommodating increased population density. The commercial quarter of Parthian period Uruk expanded significantly through the construction of new market facilities, warehouse complexes, and workshop areas that supported growing trade volumes and manufacturing activities. Archaeological excavations have uncovered standardized shop units arranged around central courtyards, large storage buildings with sophisticated inventory management systems, and specialized production facilities for various craft industries. These commercial developments demonstrate the economic prosperity that characterized Uruk during its integration into Parthian trade networks. The demographic composition of Parthian period Uruk included substantial populations of Iranians, Greeks, Mesopotamians, and other ethnic groups from throughout the empire, creating a cosmopolitan urban environment that fostered cultural exchange and innovation. Marriage relationships between different ethnic communities produced mixed populations that served as cultural intermediaries and facilitated communication between diverse groups. Archaeological evidence from cemetery sites shows burial practices that combined elements from multiple cultural traditions, indicating the emergence of synthetic cultural identities among these mixed populations. The agricultural administration of Uruk's territorial district under Parthian rule involved systematic improvements to irrigation infrastructure and the introduction of new cultivation techniques that increase productivity. Throughout the region, Parthian engineers constructed new canal systems that incorporated Iranian hydraulic technologies with traditional Mesopotamian water management methods. These improvements enable the cultivation of previously marginal lands while reducing labor requirements and improving crop yields through more efficient water distribution systems. Archaeological surveys of the Uruk countryside show evidence for expanded settlement patterns and intensified agricultural production that supported growing urban populations while generating substantial surpluses for trade and taxation. New agricultural techniques included the introduction of Iranian crop varieties, improved plowing methods, and systematic crop rotation systems that maintain soil fertility while maximizing productivity. These innovations contributed to the economic prosperity that characterized the Parthian period at Uruk. The military organization that maintained Parthian control over Uruk and surrounding territories combined traditional Iranian cavalry tactics with infantry formations adapted to local conditions and strategic requirements. Parthian heavy cavalry equipped with scale armor and long lances provided the primary striking force for major military operations, while light cavalry units conducted reconnaissance and harassment activities. Infantry forces recruited from local populations contributed specialized skills and regional knowledge that enhanced overall military effectiveness. Archaeological excavations at military installations have uncovered weapons, armor, and equipment that demonstrate the systematic integration of Iranian and Mesopotamian military technologies. Parthian metal workers produced composite bows with superior range and penetrating power compared to earlier weapons, while traditional Mesopotamian armor-making techniques were enhanced through the introduction of Iranian metallurgical innovations. The combination of different military traditions created effective fighting forces capable of defending Parthian territories against both internal rebellions and external threats. The frontier position of Uruk between Roman and Parthian spheres of influence created ongoing military tensions that required constant vigilance and substantial defensive preparations. Roman expansion eastward under Trajan and later emperors brought Roman legions into direct contact with Parthian forces along the Euphrates River, creating a militarized border zone that affected all aspects of life in Mesopotamian cities. Archaeological evidence shows the construction of new fortifications, the expansion of military installations, and the implementation of early warning systems that enabled rapid response to potential Roman invasions. The cultural synthesis that emerged at Uruk during the Parthian period created distinctive artistic traditions that combined Mesopotamian, Iranian, and Greek aesthetic elements in innovative sculpture. From this period demonstrates technical innovations in stone carving and bronze casting while maintaining symbolic and religious significance derived from multiple cultural traditions. Relief panels decorating public buildings featured complex iconographic programs that communicated political and religious messages to diverse audiences using visual languages derived from different cultural sources. The artistic innovations and cultural synthesis that characterized Uruk during the later Parthian period provided the foundation for an extraordinary renaissance when Ardashir-I established the Sasanian Empire in 224 AD, overthrowing the lasted rulers and initiating what would become the final major phase of ancient Mesopotamian urban civilization. The Sasanian conquest of Uruk occurred through systematic military campaigns that combined traditional Iranian cavalry tactics with improved siege warfare techniques, enabling Ardashir's forces to capture fortified cities more efficiently than their Parthian predecessors. Archaeological evidence from transition layers shows minimal destruction during the changeover, indicating that Uruk's surrender followed negotiated agreements rather than prolonged resistance as local administrators recognized the superior organization and resources of the emerging Sasanian state. The administrative integration of Uruk into the Sasanian Empire represented a masterpiece of imperial organization that surpassed even Persian Emenid governmental efficiency through systematic bureaucratic reforms and improved communication networks. Sasanian rulers established a hierarchical administrative system that divided the empire into four major regions, with Uruk becoming a crucial provincial center within Mesopotamia's administrative district. The appointment of provincial governors combined Iranian noble lineage with demonstrated administrative competence, creating governmental structures that balanced imperial control with local autonomy, while maintaining consistent policy implementation throughout the empire. Archaeological excavations in Uruk's administrative quarter have uncovered evidence for comprehensive renovation projects undertaken during the early Sasanian period that transformed governmental facilities according to new imperial standards. Sasanian architects constructed a massive palace complex measuring approximately 300 x 200 m, featuring distinctive architectural elements including barrel-vault reception halls, elaborate stucco decorations, and sophisticated heating systems that demonstrated advanced engineering capabilities. The complex incorporated traditional Mesopotamian spatial arrangements with Iranian architectural innovations, creating functional governmental facilities that accommodated both imperial ceremonies and routine administrative activities. The most impressive architectural achievement within the Sasanian administrative complex was the construction of an audience hall designed according to Imperial protocols established at Ctesiphon, the Sasanian capital. Massive hyperstyle structure measured 80 by 60 m and featured a soaring barrel. Vaults supported by massive brick pillars decorated with carved stucco reliefs, depicting royal hunting scenes and divine investiture ceremonies. The interior surfaces were covered with polychrome paintings executed in the distinctive Sasanian artistic style, featuring geometric patterns, stylized animal motifs, and symbolic representations of royal authority that communicated imperial ideology to visitors from throughout the province. The integration of Sasanian administrative personnel with existing Mesopotamian bureaucratic structures created unprecedented levels of governmental efficiency while preserving traditional local administrative practices that had proven effective over centuries of foreign rule. Sasanian officials assumed responsibility for military affairs, major taxation, and communication with the imperial court, while traditional Mesopotamian administrators continued to manage local judicial proceedings, religious ceremonies, and community affairs. This administrative division enabled effective governance while preventing cultural conflicts that might have resulted from more radical governmental transformation. Cuneiform archives from the Sasanian period document the systematic adaptation of traditional Mesopotamian record-keeping practices to accommodate new imperial administrative requirements. Scribal schools modified their curricula to include instruction in Middle Persian, the official administrative language of the Sasanian Empire, while maintaining traditional training in Aramaic and remaining ununiform traditions for specialized religious and legal purposes. Bilingual administrative tablets from this period show Sasanian tax assessments and legal decisions recorded in Middle Persian, alongside traditional Mesopotamian commercial and religious documents written in Aramaic demonstrating practical accommodation between imperial and local administrative traditions. The military reorganization that accompanied Sasanian rule at Uruk involved the construction of new fortification systems and the establishment of professional garrison forces that integrated the city into broader imperial defensive networks. Sasanian military engineers designed fortifications that incorporated lessons learned from centuries of warfare against Roman legions, creating defensive systems capable of withstanding prolonged siege operations, while maintaining communication with other imperial strongholds. The main defensive circuit constructed around Uruk featured massive stone foundations supporting brick superstructures reinforced with iron clamps and mortar containing volcanic ash that create exceptionally durable construction. Archaeological investigation of these Sasanian fortifications reveals sophisticated defensive architecture that combined traditional Near Eastern military engineering with innovations developed through conflict with Roman and Byzantine forces. The walls incorporated projecting towers at regular intervals that provided overlapping fields of fire for defensive artillery, while elaborate gate complexes featured multiple defensive chambers and portcullis systems that could halt attacking forces within killing zones. Underground passages connected different sections of the fortification system, enabling defenders to move reinforcements and supplies without exposure to enemy observation or artillery fire. The economic prosperity that characterized Uruk during the Sasanian period resulted from systematic imperial policies that promoted agricultural development, craft production, and long-distance trade throughout the empire. Sasanian authorities implemented comprehensive irrigation improvements that increased agricultural productivity while reducing labor requirements through more efficient water management systems. New canal construction incorporated Advanced hydraulic engineering techniques that minimized water loss and improved distribution reliability, while systematic maintenance programs ensured long-term functionality of irrigation infrastructure. Archaeological surveys of the Uruk countryside show evidence for expanded settlement patterns and intensified agricultural production that supported growing urban populations while generating substantial surpluses for imperial taxation and commercial export. Sasanian agricultural innovations included the introduction of new crop varieties, improved cultivation techniques, and systematic livestock breeding programs that enhanced overall agricultural productivity. The development of sugarcane cultivation, introduced from India through Sasanian trade networks, created new commercial opportunities while diversifying agricultural production beyond traditional grain crops. The craft production that flourished at Uruk during the Sasanian period achieved unprecedented levels of technical sophistication and artistic achievement through imperial patronage and improved access to raw materials from throughout the empire. Metal workshops produced steel implements and weapons that incorporated advanced Iranian metallurgical techniques with traditional Mesopotamian manufacturing methods, creating products renowned throughout the ancient world for their quality and durability. Archaeological analysis of metal artifacts from this period shows sophisticated alloy compositions and heat treatment processes that produce tools and weapons superior to contemporary Roman and Byzantine products. Textile production during the Sasanian period established Uruk as one of the empire's premier manufacturing centers through the development of silk weaving techniques and the production of luxury fabrics for imperial and international markets. Workshops employed hundreds of skilled weavers who created elaborate silk textiles decorated with complex patterns featuring royal imagery, religious symbolism, and mythological themes executed with extraordinary technical precision. Archaeological excavations in textile production areas have uncovered sophisticated dyeing installations, specialized looms, and storage facilities that demonstrate the industrial scale of these manufacturing operations. The religious policies implemented by Sasanian authorities at Uruk reflected the empire's official Zoroastrian ideology while maintaining practical tolerance for traditional Mesopotamian spiritual practices and emerging Christian communities. Zoroastrianism became the preferred religion for imperial administration and military service. But traditional Mesopotamian deities continued to receive official recognition and financial support for temple maintenance and ceremonial activities. This religious accommodation created a complex spiritual environment that satisfied diverse religious communities while reinforcing imperial political authority through theological legitimation. The construction of fire temples throughout Uruk during the Sasanian period established Zoroastrian worship as a prominent feature of urban religious life while respecting existing spiritual traditions. These fire temples, built according to standardized architectural designs employed throughout the empire, featured central fire chambers where sacred flames burned continuously, surrounded by ceremonial spaces for religious instruction and community gatherings. Archaeological excavations have revealed sophisticated ventilation systems that maintained proper combustion conditions while preventing smoke accumulation, demonstrating advanced understanding of architectural engineering principles. The renovation of traditional Mesopotamian temple complexes during the Sasanian period incorporated Zoroastrian ceremonial elements while preserving established religious functions and architectural arrangements. The Yana temple complex underwent extensive modification that added fire altars for Zoroastrian ceremonies alongside traditional Mesopotamian ritual equipment, creating comprehensive religious facilities that served multiple spiritual communities within integrated architectural frameworks. Decorative programs combined traditional Mesopotamian religious imagery with Zoroastrian symbolic elements, producing artistic syntheses that communicated complex theological messages to diverse audiences. The emergence of Christian communities at Uruk during the Sasanian period reflected broader religious developments throughout Mesopotamia as Christianity spread eastward from Syria and Armenia. Sasanian religious policies generally tolerated Christian worship while requiring political loyalty to imperial authority, enabling Christian communities to establish churches and develop institutional structures without systematic persecution. Archaeological evidence shows the construction of several Christian churches at Uruk during the 5th and 6th centuries featuring distinctive architectural elements, including basilica layouts, baptismal facilities, and decorative programs that adapted Christian symbolism to local artistic traditions. The educational institutions that operated at Uruk during the Sasanian period combined traditional Mesopotamian scholarly disciplines with Zoroastrian religious instruction and practical training in imperial administrative methods. Temple schools expanded their curricula to include Middle Persian language and literature while maintaining instruction in Aramaic and specialized cuneiform traditions for religious and legal purposes. These educational programs produced administrators, religious personnel, and commercial specialists capable of serving diverse functions within the complex cultural environment of the Sasanian Empire. Archaeological excavations in educational facilities have uncovered extensive collections of texts written on parchment, papyrus, and traditional clay tablets that demonstrate the multilingual and multicultural character of Sasanian period education. Mathematical treatises show continued development of computational techniques for commercial and administrative applications, while astronomical texts document systematic observations that contributed to chondrical calculations and agricultural planning. Literary compositions include both traditional Mesopotamian works and new creations that reflected contemporary cultural interests and imperial ideological themes. The astronomical achievements of Sasanian period scholars at Uruk built upon centuries of Mesopotamian observational traditions while incorporating theoretical frameworks developed through contact with Indian and Greek scientific traditions. Sasanian astronomers maintained detailed records of planetary movements, lunar cycles, and stellar positions that enabled accurate prediction of celestial events and the creation of precise cylindrical systems. These scientific activities contributed to the development of mathematical astronomy that influenced scholarly traditions throughout the Islamic world. Following the Arab conquest, the legal system that operated at Uruk under Sasanian administration combined traditional Mesopotamian jurisprudence with Zoroastrian religious law and imperial legal codes that applied throughout the empire. Sasanian authorities established courts that handled cases involving imperial interests, religious disputes, and conflicts between individuals from different ethnic or cultural backgrounds, while traditional legal institutions continued to manage local civil and commercial matters. This complex legal environment required sophisticated understanding of multiple legal traditions and created comprehensive judicial frameworks that could address diverse legal situations. Archaeological evidence from Sasanian period legal archives shows systematic documentation of property transfers, commercial contracts, and judicial proceedings using standardized legal formulas that accommodated various cultural expectations while maintaining consistent imperial standards. These records demonstrate the sophisticated legal frameworks that supported commercial activities and maintained social order within the multi-ethnic environment of the Sasanian Empire. The integration of different legal traditions created flexible judicial systems that balanced imperial requirements with local customs and community expectations. The urban development that occurred at Uruk during the Sasanian period involved comprehensive infrastructure, improvements and population expansion that transformed the city into one of Mesopotamia's most prosperous urban centers. New residential districts constructed during this period incorporated advanced architectural techniques, including improved drainage systems, standardized building materials, and planned layouts that enhance living conditions while accommodating increased population density. These neighborhoods featured distinctive Sasanian architectural elements, including barrel-vaulted roofs, decorative stucco work, and sophisticated ventilation systems that provided comfortable living environments in Mesopotamia's challenging climate. The commercial expansion that characterized Sasanian period Uruk resulted from the city's integration into imperial trade networks that connected the Mediterranean world with Central Asia, India, and China. Merchants from Uruk participated in lucrative silk trade operations while maintaining traditional commercial relationships with regional markets. Throughout Mesopotamia and the Iranian Plateau, archaeological deposits from this period contain unprecedented quantities of imported goods including Chinese silk, Indian spices and precious stones, Central Asian metal work, and Mediterranean luxury items that demonstrate the extraordinary geographical scope of Sasanian commercial networks. The construction of new market facilities during the Sasanian period created comprehensive commercial infrastructure that supported growing trade volumes and manufacturing activities. Archaeological excavations have uncovered large warehouse complexes with sophisticated storage systems, standardized shop units arranged around central courtyards, and specialized production facilities for various craft industries. These commercial developments included banking facilities that provided financial services for long-distance trade, demonstrating the sophisticated commercial institutions that supported Sasanian economic prosperity. The demographic composition of Sasanian period Uruk included substantial populations of Iranians, Mesopotamians, Arabs, and other ethnic groups from throughout the empire, creating a cosmopolitan urban environment that fostered cultural exchange and innovation. Marriage relationships between different communities produced mixed populations that served as cultural intermediaries and facilitated communication between diverse groups. Archaeological evidence from cemetery sites shows burial practices that combined elements from multiple cultural and religious traditions, indicating the emergence of synthetic cultural identities that transcended traditional ethnic boundaries. The agricultural innovations implemented in Uruk's territorial district during the Sasanian period included the introduction of new irrigation technologies, crop varieties, and cultivation techniques that significantly increase productivity throughout the region. Sasanian engineers constructed advanced water management systems that incorporated underground channels, mechanical lifting devices, and distribution networks that enabled cultivation of previously marginal lands. These improvements supported growing urban populations, while generating agricultural surpluses that contributed to imperial taxation and commercial export activities. Archaeological evidence shows the systematic expansion of cultivated areas and the development of specialized agricultural production that took advantage of regional environmental conditions and market opportunities. The cultivation of cotton introduced through Sustinian trade connections with India created new textile production opportunities while diversifying agricultural output beyond traditional food crops. Systematic livestock breeding programs improved the quality of horses, cattle, and sheep, while the development of commercial fisheries in artificial ponds provided additional protein sources for urban populations. The final phase of Sasanian rule at Uruk coincided with increasing pressure from Arab tribal confederations that had been expanding northward from the Arabian Peninsula since the late 6th century. The military campaigns launched by Islamic forces under the Rashidun Caliphate beginning in 633 AD created unprecedented challenges for Sasanian defensive capabilities already strained by prolonged conflicts with the Byzantine Empire. Archaeological evidence from the latest Sasanian levels at Uruk shows hasty defensive preparations and the concealment of valuable objects, indicating that local authorities recognized the seriousness of the Arab military threat. The Battle of Qadisa in 636 AD marked the decisive moment when Arab forces under Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas defeated the main Sasanian army and opened Mesopotamia to Islamic conquest. The aftermath of this victory enabled Arab forces to advance rapidly throughout the region, capturing major cities, including Ctesiphon, and establishing Islamic control over the former Sasanian heartland. Uruk's surrender to Arab forces in 637 AD marked the end of over 4 centuries of Sasanian rule and initiated the final transformation of ancient Mesopotamian urban civilization under Islamic administration. The surrender of Uruk to Arab forces in 637 AD occurred through negotiated capitulation rather than violent conquest, as local Sinian administrators recognized the futility of resistance. Following the decisive Arab victory at Qadisa, the transition proceeded with remarkable efficiency as Arab military commanders implemented administrative policies that preserved existing governmental structures while establishing Islamic authority over the ancient Mesopotamian city. Archaeological evidence from this transitional period shows no significant destruction layers, indicating that the changeover occurred peacefully with minimal disruption to urban life and economic activities. The initial Islamic administration of Uruk and the Irashidun Caliphate maintained many existing Sasanian governmental practices while introducing new religious and legal frameworks based on Islamic principles. Arab military governors appointed to oversee Mesopotamian territories typically possessed extensive experience in tribal leadership and military organization, but relied heavily on former Sasanian administrators who understood local conditions and established bureaucratic procedures. This pragmatic approach enabled effective governance during the crucial early years of Islamic rule while preventing the administrative chaos that might have resulted from complete governmental transformation. Cuneiform tablets from the earliest Islamic period document the systematic adaptation of traditional Mesopotamian record-keeping practices to accommodate new Islamic administrative requirements. Arabic gradually replaced Middle Persian as the primary language for official correspondence and legal documentation, while Aramaic and remaining cuneiform traditions continue to serve specialized religious and commercial functions within established communities. Bilingual administrative records from this period show Islamic tax assessments and legal decisions recorded in Arabic alongside traditional commercial contracts and property transfers written in Aramaic, demonstrating the practical accommodation between new Islamic governance and established local practices. The religious transformation of Uruk under Islamic rule involved the gradual conversion of large segments of the population while maintaining tolerance toward Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians. Through the dhimmi system, non-Muslims were allowed to practice their faiths and retain institutions in exchange for special taxes and legal restrictions. This approach minimized religious conflict and encouraged voluntary conversion through social and economic incentives. Archaeology confirms the construction of Uruk's first mosque in the early Umayyad period, built with traditional Mesopotamian mud brick methods but featuring Islamic elements such as the mihrab niche and minbar pulpit. Existing temples and fire shrines were gradually repurposed for Islamic worship, reoriented toward Mecca, and stripped of their former ritual equipment. Economically, Uruk became integrated into the vast Islamic trade network stretching from Spain to Central Asia. Merchants participated in Mediterranean and Indian Ocean commerce, bringing in North African pottery, Spanish metalwork, Indian textiles, and Chinese ceramics. Yet this prosperity was short-lived. The founding of Baghdad in 762 AD redirected trade and population flows, undermining Uruk's traditional role. Workshops and skilled artisans migrated to Baghdad and Basra, causing declines in textile production and metalwork. By the 8th and 9th centuries, archaeological evidence shows widespread economic contraction and workshop relocation, leading to depopulation of Uruk's once thriving districts. Urban decline was compounded by neglect of the irrigation systems that had sustained Mesopotamian agriculture for millennia. Maintaining canals required skilled engineers and centralized oversight, both of which eroded as populations moved away. By the 9th century, canals were silting up, gates collapsed, and stagnant water spread disease. Reduced irrigation diminished agricultural output, reinforcing population loss. Families abandoned homes, often salvaging materials before leaving for Baghdad or Basra. Archaeological surveys show whole neighborhoods falling empty, with some reused as storage or workshops before final abandonment. Uruk's educational traditions also faltered. Temple schools that had preserved cuneiform literacy and Mesopotamian astronomy found their role eclipsed by Arabic and Islamic curricula emphasizing Quranic studies and law. The last cuneiform tablets from Uruk date to the late 8th century, marking the end of a 3,000-year writing tradition. Yet Mesopotamian knowledge lived on, through translation projects in Baghdad. Ancient astronomical, mathematical, and medical texts entered Arabic scholarship and influenced Islamic science. Abandonment of Uruk occurred in phases. The administrative quarter, central since the early dynastic era, was among the first to be deserted as Islamic rulers shifted administration to larger centers. Valuable materials were stripped from buildings for reuse elsewhere. Residential areas emptied gradually as families relocated. Religious quarters lingered longer, with priests and scholars continuing small-scale rituals and preserving texts, though younger generations departed for opportunities within Islamic institutions. By the 10th century, Uruk was largely reduced to seasonal agricultural use and shelter for nomads. Even the great ziggurat was dismantled for bricks. Environmental changes hastened this decline. Paleoclimatic evidence indicates rising aridity during the 9th and 10th centuries, reducing river flow and agricultural reliability. As irrigation collapsed, the landscape shifted from intensive cultivation to pastoral grazing. Bedouin tribes increasingly used the region for seasonal herding, establishing camps near water and reusing abandoned structures. This marked a profound transformation of a land that had once supported dense urban settlement for 4 millennia. Modern archaeology reveals the scale of Uruk's abandonment. Surveys and satellite imagery document vast canal systems, deserted settlements, and field boundaries, all testifying to the collapse of Mesopotamian agricultural infrastructure. Excavations since 1912, led initially by Julius Jordan, uncovered Uruk's extraordinary historical depth. The world's first city, birthplace of writing, monumental architecture, and complex administration. Thousands of cuneiform tablets illuminate economic systems, governance, religion, and daily life. Uruk's legacy extends beyond its ruins. The city pioneered urban planning, bureaucracy, law, and education, establishing models that shaped subsequent civilizations. Writing, first invented there, laid the foundation for recorded history and the preservation of knowledge. Even after its decline, its intellectual contributions were absorbed into the Islamic Golden Age, ensuring continuity of Mesopotamian traditions. Today, excavations and preservation efforts continue despite political instability and environmental threats. Digital reconstructions, detailed surveys, and catalogs safeguard Uruk's heritage for future study. The story of Uruk, rising from a small village around 3500 BC to a global center of civilization and finally declining by the 10th century AD, remains one of humanity's most remarkable narratives. Though buried beneath Iraq's desert sands, Uruk's contributions endure in the foundations of human culture, law, science, and history.